Welcome everybody to the Recovery Capital Podcast.
That's 2 weeks in a row. You just get so excited. Like, you get so excited, you just can't wait to talk about it.
Dude, this is my favorite thing in the whole world, Recovery Capital. So we start every time laughing too. So my name is Joanna Dolan, and we are going to talk about Recovery Capital during our podcast. So let me just give you a brief rundown of what that is. So Recovery Capital is the internal and external resources that you have and or build to help you to obtain, sustain, and maintain recovery. And you know, if you are some part of the recovery care team, if you are someone who is seeking recovery, or if you are a loved one, we hope that there is something in here for you. Amy, you want to go ahead and introduce yourself?
Yes, I do. And we just recently talked about this. I got to work on my intro because I don't really know. It's never the same, even though my job doesn't change from week to week. So my name is Amy DePietro. I am a person in long-term recovery. I'm a peer advocate for Colmac Outpatient Recovery Centers, as well as a alumni coordinator, which is kind of like a fancy way of saying I get to help remind people in recovery or trying to get into recovery that it can be fun and there is life after drugs and alcohol. And who doesn't want that job?
Yeah, that's an awesome job.
Right?
I'm down with that.
My turn?
That's it. That was it. I think
That's what she's got.
All I got.
Okay.
You want to go ahead and introduce yourself, Christina?
Yes, so I am Christina Gunner, former clinical director at Colmac Outpatient Recovery in Columbia. Shout out to everyone. And current psychotherapist at Gladstone Psychiatry and Wellness. And I have been working in the addiction community for, I don't know, let's call it 11 years.
Oh, that's awesome.
Thank you.
I've been doing it for about the same time. So much has changed in 11 years.
Indeed, it has.
So what brought you to this work?
So I sort of fell into it by accident, actually. When I started out in my career as a graduate student, they told me, okay, you can pick your next field placement. And I said, oh, okay, well, let me see. I've been working with adolescents. I've been working crisis stabilization. It's really fast paced. It's really interesting. And I think that's what I'm going to do. I think that's what it's all about. I'm going to stay in crisis. I'm going to stay in this environment, right? And then this opportunity came up to do an internship at Colmac, where you work with adults with addictions in outpatient, everything and everyone I had never worked with, never dealt with, and never really been around in a professional capacity, I should say. So I said, well, why not? That ought to make my experience a little bit more well-rounded. And suffice it to say, I never left, because I'm still a clinician at Colmac running an outpatient group 11 years later.
Oh, that's awesome. I didn't realize you were a clinician at Colmac.
Yes, that is my part-time gig now as I moved into private practice. But suffice it to say, it should tell you a little bit about how passionately I feel about this work and what it is.
So what is it about working with a bunch of drunks that you like? I mean, besides the fact that we're awesome.
Yeah, I was going to say, like, is it a rhetorical question?
Well, I think the first part is you will never meet a group of people in some ways that have experienced more pain, more discomfort, and have a better sense of humor about the entire thing than this particular group of people. And there is no way to separate it out from anybody. So it is the great equalizer for everyone across the lifespan, across socioeconomic, across mental health background and history, upbringing, experience, it's all there.
Yeah, that makes perfect sense to me. That makes perfect sense. As you were saying that, I was actually sitting here thinking like old school AA, right? The big book, it says right in there, like we're people that would not normally mix. We're people that we've come together and now we're friends because of this common problem and this common solution. So how long does it take for someone who is entering treatment at the IOP level to like connect with others?
I think for many people, when they enter treatment, you have to consider that oftentimes they are coming to you if not their worst day, one of their worst, right? So there is I think a degree of vulnerability that is available there if they're willing to engage, willing to just pause for a moment and take in what treatment, what support, what other people that have maybe a little bit of experience or know-how have to offer in that moment. And I think for many people in the recovery community could speak to this, you two, for example, that there is an absolute desperate desire and fear of connection.
Oh, 100%.
I'm still my own best friend for that reason. Just kidding. Just kidding.
No, that's
we always
so
have
true.
you to go back to. We never.
Yeah, you know.
That's so true though, because I was so like alone. Even in a room full of people, I was completely alone. But I was terrified to be alone. That's so true.
There's that strong desire to connect, and then there's that survival mechanism that kicks in and says run, right? And what good treatment does is offer a bridge between those two worlds.
Well,
where like you have the opportunity, you know, to maybe you're not going to fully connect. You're not going to be 100% on board. I used to say to people often, you know, I don't need you to be 100% committed to this process. I don't need 90%. I need 51, and you be willing not to run right this second, and we can work from there. Because there's always an opportunity to build on that.
That makes perfect sense. So it sounds like you live by the law of 51%.
Mm-hmm.
Is that a thing?
Yeah, that's like really a thing.
Tell me what that means.
Well, it means that we, in some ways, that's sort of the first entry point into a recovery mindset. You know, that's that first entry point of it no longer has to be a black and white experience. I no longer have to be in a position where either I choose this or I go back out and choose that and crash and burn. You know, 51% means welcome to the gray. This is super uncomfortable and weird and awkward. And let's just sit here in it together for a little bit and see what happens.
Oh man, just hearing that makes me feel uncomfortable. I'm like instantly reminded of like how uncomfortable that was. I mean, I'm way better now. Don't get me wrong, but that's so true. Like this sounds so terrible. There was never a part of me that thought from the beginning, oh, I'm going to be sober. I think I would imagine the vast majority of us don't intend to stay the course. We may not articulate it because you don't know what you're supposed to say, you know, but nobody actually says, well, I don't really want to do this. Now I'm here. Do you know what I mean?
Oh, absolutely. And again, I think that's sort of the role of, you know, clinicians and other people to sometimes put into practice this notion of calling something what it is. Like, this is early recovery and it sucks. Yeah, it does. But oh, by the way, here's the good news. It's not a permanent state of being.
I think that was the thing that like attracted me to recovery, because by the time I got done, like I was done. I entered recovery, and I was like, I want to be here. I'm tired of suffering. I'm like, just please make the pain stop, and it was either, I was clear. I was like, I can die. I'm okay with that. Or I can, I can get better, and I'm okay either way. So now what?
Wow, yeah. I don't know that I thought that. I definitely had no value left in my own life. Like, no, I had no skin in that game left. Like, it didn't matter. Literally, you just are existing, treating yourself like a garbage can. I treated myself like a garbage can, just trash, trash, trash.
But I think even in those states, there's times where we're going to move through that. We're not meant to stay in that steady state of desperation forever and ever and ever. So even to your point, Joanna, I imagine that there was times where, as sort of convinced as you were that I can either go this way or I can go that way, the ambivalence is going to show up throughout that process.
Oh yeah, I think that was the ambivalence. Like I could die,
Mm-hmm.
or like I could get better. That was it. But I knew I couldn't use. I mean, they had. I know they don't do this as much anymore, but like, I mean, they told me about the Marty Mann test. Which is try some controlled drinking for a week.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, like go to the same bar at the same time of day, take 2 drinks, that's it. And I freaked out. I was like, I can't do that.
Yeah.
Because it was like, try some controlled drinking. I'm like, nope, 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 nope. I freaked out, and like every single time I hear that, I still freak out because I'm like, that I can't do that.
Yeah, for sure.
It makes me shudder a little bit, the thought of it,
Why is that?
of testing that theory, because I think that's that painful place that so many people enter into treatment on, which is on the fence. Like, I really, really want this, and I really, really have no idea what that's actually going to look like and entail, and how I'm actually going to get from where I am right this moment to over there where I want to be, at least in theory right now. So that space of like, well, maybe the kinda, the sorta, if I could just hedge a little bit more, I can only imagine how terrifying and uncomfortable that would be.
Yeah. And I think like that's the thing. Like, that's why I said I was a little bit different than you, Amy.
Yeah, because I didn't come into sobriety because I wanted to. I got kind of forced. Is probably the nice way to say it.
You said that what? Very quietly.
Coerced.
Yes.
I had.
Is that normal?
Well, you see, Joanna, I had broken the law. And since we are going to put this on vast platforms of social media, I'm not going to go into a lot of detail on that. But I had.
They busted you?
I had committed what they call a felony.
Oh.
And
there was that matter.
Yeah. And so without changing names to protect the innocent, I was in a situation where either I was given an opportunity to go to treatment and get help, or I was going to go to like big girl prison. And I'll be really honest, I don't think that I would have, and nobody wants to go to jail, right? But like, I don't know that I would have made it in that setting. I don't think I would have like freaked out. So I did go to treatment, but completely under the guise of, I'll just do this, because it wasn't my first time in treatment. I'll just do this and I'll appease the masses, and they'll forget. I'll go back to doing me. And that's just not at all what happened. And thank God that's not at all what happened. Like, I went
so glad you got sidetracked on the way, Amy.
So glad my plans don't work out. You know what I mean? Like, thank God they don't work out.
This is where failure is useful.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. It was cool, man. I am so grateful to have had the experience that I did. And I'm even more grateful that I had it the way I had it, that I didn't enter treatment by my own hands, because come to find out, it doesn't matter
Mm.
why you go, right? Like, just that, because, some people are like, I'm going to die if I spend one more day out here. Or if you're forced in because the courts or whatever, to me, what it showed me was that it's irrelevant what brings you in the door or sets you on that path. What matters is what keeps you on that path.
Dude, I think this is a really great thing, right? So it doesn't matter to us like why we got here, why we are, how we ended up, right? But it does from a clinical standpoint, right? Like I remember like 5 years ago, I was working under a clinical director, and she said that people enter treatment for one of two reasons. Either they are done, they're broken, like addiction has broken them, or they are there to manage consequences. And the way that you interact with them, the way that you support them and you help them to navigate to the next level, they're different. Is that true?
In my experience, I'd sort of respectfully disagree with that.
Okay.
I don't believe that it matters what gets somebody in the door. I believe much more, sort of maybe in a sense, this notion of the consequences, whatever those consequences are, internal, external, the court system, your own sense of like, I'm going to die if I don't do this, got you through that door. It's my belief that the benefits are what keep you. It's not about what it is that pushed you through the doorway to begin with. We can ideally eventually look back on those things and have some degree of gratitude for that experience, internal, external, forcefully or a little more gently than not. But at the end of the day, it's really about getting you through that threshold so that then you can have the opportunity to actually touch base with those benefits and experience it for yourself, to hold on.
Okay, that makes sense. So let me ask you this: are you when you, because you're the first clinician we've had on, right? So I'm just going to ask all the nerdy geeky questions, right?
I love it.
Let's do it.
Nerd out.
So since it doesn't matter, right? And it's about like navigating, what I heard was, it doesn't matter what the consequences are. It matters getting through to the gratitude piece, right? And because the benefits are what's going to keep you. So if that's true, then how do you get people to the place where they're like, I feel some of the benefits?
So, I mean, again, you have to deal with sort of what's tangibly in front of you. As I would often say to people, I don't think there's a bad reason to enter treatment, right? I think the way that gets turned around in various settings is this like, well, if I brought myself here, that somehow that's going to insulate me. And if I didn't bring myself here and I have all these particular consequences, that's somehow going to insulate me. But the truth is, and I think everybody here knows this to be true, there's nothing that insulates you against this. You can rejoin that world at any point, any time. That door is never locked or unavailable to you at the end of the day.
Yeah, true story.
Get your misery back.
Yeah.
But I think as you work with somebody, wherever they are in that process, and are willing to say to them, whatever your reasons are good reasons for being here, so let's go ahead and see what we can do about that. Whether I want to appease the court and get through this, or I want to appease my spouse and get through this, or look, I'm on the liver transplant list and I'm not going to get one if I don't do this. Okay. To me, none of those things are really different, because when it comes down to it, there is some degree of willingness on your part, and I have the resources in which to propel you along that course. It really, to me, is that simple. Like, it does not have to be such a complicated venture at every turn. we analyze and overanalyze. Is it good enough? Is it because of this? Is it because of that? If it motivated you to get up and come through the door today and maybe again tomorrow, and then maybe I have to remind you of it the next day so that you come again, good enough for me.
I'm so glad to hear you say that. Like people
Yeah.
say so much, like you got to have a why and it can't be this and it's like, dude, those are my whys.
Well, and we don't need to know why in order to know what to do to move forward from it.
Yeah,
We
no, I
already
meant the
have
motivation
really-
part.
Yeah,
The motivation.
there's clear pieces of, you know, whatever it is that brings somebody in. And if they never have one solid thing that they point to say, this is what got me into recovery, who cares? You know, the bigger question is, are you willing to take steps to engage in this process called recovery? And what would that look like for you? Because you can keep that going on that basis alone without ever having a definitive, this is what it was, this is how I got here, here's the magic bullet. It's not a one size fits all.
Yeah, I like that. What do you think about, like there's all that, I feel like there's so much judgment wrapped around relapse. And I'm not like, so I'm not somebody that got it quote unquote right on the first try, right? Like relapse is part of my story. Do you think there, and I know your answer, but I'm just, you know,
That's cheating.
no, I'm teeing it up so you can spike the ball. I think it's important. I think talking about relapse is important. And I think it's important for people to know that just because it happens doesn't mean that you effed up.
Yeah. So you know the answer, but look surprised. Okay, thank you.
Was that good? It felt kind of natural, to be honest.
Yeah, that was pretty good.
Okay, cool.
Pretty good. We can use that. So I think there's a couple of things when it comes to relapse. One is that, yeah, the sort of bigger picture at large, there's so many judgments that come up. And we could go lots of different perspectives on this, but I'll start with the one I think pretty well, which is a lot of patients who just kick themselves and beat themselves up and lash themselves for going back to what's a very familiar and normal behavior for them. And the part that gets left out is that all of us as human beings, whether we suffer from an addiction or not, are going to gravitate towards what's comfortable or familiar. Notice nowhere in that set does it say there's a rule that we only do that if it's something functional. Bullshit. We do it anyway. We do it because we're human beings and we seek comfort. We are built and designed to move away from pain, to move away from, you know, uncertainty and anything that brings us that kind of anxiety. So I think that's sort of one point about it. Oftentimes family members, friends, loved ones are terrified as a result of this because this kicks off their survival mechanism. So all they hear when we say, hey, relapse could be a part of this is, oh my God, what are we going to do about it? It's like, no, we have all the tools in which, again, to work with that. It is really about being able to keep somebody engaged, regardless of how many times, you know, the old cliche, it's not about how many times you fall, how many times you get back up and are willing to re-engage in the process. You know, I will also point out, and this is one that just gets to me every time, well, relapse is a part of recovery. No, it's not a required part of the process. Please don't go on thinking, oh, damn, I got to test this theory a couple times before I can get this right.
Well, yeah, we're not advocating for it. Let me be clear.
Correct.
Relapse is a part of addiction. It's not a part of recovery.
Exactly.
Well
relapse is actually part of the state of addiction. However, relapse sometimes is instructive in a way that other things are not. You know, relapse in some way can shatter the illusion around that experience and that practice in a way that hearing in a group or in a meeting or from a friend or from your parent or your spouse just does not hit home, right? You know, our emotional brain learns from experience. And sometimes the pain and the discomfort of that experience is a big teacher.
Oh my God, yeah.
When you say emotional brain, what does that mean?
I mean, very specifically, that emotional experience, I think, oftentimes like to labor under this illusion that we are very rational, logical creatures. And I'm here to tell you that we're not. There are many, many decisions that get made, practiced, and reinforced on autopilot. We do it all day, every day, without ever having a full conscious awareness about it. And you could, healthy, unhealthy, dysfunctional, functional behaviors, whatever category you put it in. Again, sometimes that relapse can be instructive in really connecting people to each aspect of that, because if you don't know that something is problematic, how in the hell are you ever gonna put up barriers and layers of protection and insulation around yourself in order to protect yourself moving forward?
Yeah.
So a lot of people come in and they say, this happened, 1 second I was sitting there stable in my recovery, and the next I had a drink in my hand, and I don't know what happened. And you know what? I believe them. I believe you don't know what happened, because you have practiced that and done that so many times in that place of autopilot without any conscious awareness about what's going on, that you don't even know that you're in trouble until you're already in trouble in some cases, So that relapse gives you the instruction that you need to become consciously aware of that for yourself, whatever that looks like for you.
That makes perfect sense.
Yeah, it does.
Ideally, we can learn from others as well. We have that as an option.
It's interesting to
consider other people's experience.
I totally, like, as you're like kind of you're discussing that, I relate to that on a personal level. I would assume that Joanna relates to that on a personal level. It's interesting though, like,
no one can tell me anything. Of course, it relates to me on a personal level.
Yeah, but okay, so like my immediate family, like my siblings, they wouldn't get that.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
Well, it goes back to what I said about, family members, friends with all the very best of intentions, have found themselves in their own survival mode, where, that is just going to strike at the core of their fear in many cases. So it's like, no, I don't even want to hear that. I don't even want to consider that. And then you have here come along these lovely clinicians and treatment providers and relatively neutral parties saying, no, we need to actually have a conversation about that. No, let's actually call that out and talk about exactly in a very basic way, what would it look like if your loved one, spouse, friend, significant other, whatever, had this return to use, what's the plan? And we as humans like to overcomplicate, but it doesn't have to be complicated. It needs to be simple.
Yeah.
Walk us through it, right? Because that is the most proactive, like, helpful thing that you can do for someone. Prevents, ACA, which is against clinical advice discharges, or AMA, against medical advice discharges. It's a conversation that's frank, that most people are not having with family members, or employers, or educators, or whatever. So, like, walk us through that. Like, what do you say? What sort of resources do you give someone?
So as a treatment provider, one of the, I think easiest and sometimes most useful resources that I think both patient and often family members can agree upon is not each other, right? Let's not sort of recreate that particular thing. So it could be as simple as, hey, we're not saying that this is going to take place, and we're not saying that it needs to take place in order for you to engage in this process successfully. But what we are saying is that if it takes place, the most useful thing we can do is, number one, the honesty. Tell someone. If it's not your spouse, your partner, whoever, if you have to start with Colmac or your therapist or your sponsor or whoever, tell somebody that can help you connect back to your resources, that can sort of fill in the gap, so to speak, between where you are in that place and where you want to get back to, right? Because we already know that the addiction is all about taking over your decision making. It's all about hijacking that entire system. So part of what you're doing by speaking up is just letting other people know, hey, I've been hijacked. I need y'all to walk me back. I need y'all to bring me back. And for family members and friends, that can be as simple as, you know, practicing not keeping those secrets, not holding that stuff in. Let their treatment providers know. Let us, you know, be a group or a person that can provide some type of intervention to interrupt that process. Because the sooner we can interrupt it, the better chance we have.
Perfect sense.
I'm sorry.
I said that makes perfect sense. Actually, I was sitting here thinking, so this is horrible, but it is true. When I mean, like all these years later, like the addiction still lives in me. You know, it doesn't like just go away. You know, it never. I mean, there are times when it's so quiet that I forget it's there. And then there are other times when I'm like, whoa, where did you come from? You know, so I've not affectionately named it the idiot. So when the idiot is awake, because it's not me, I'm very clear, that is not me, right?
Correct. Yeah, I agree with that.
Okay, good. So like when I'm talking about the idiot, it has nothing to do with me. Right. So it's like, well, I'm not always aware when that part of me has hijacked me, you know, and I start acting out until later on someone's like, who are you and where's my friend?
Yeah. Yeah, right.
You know, and that, you know, like that part of me, that the part of me that is not really me, like says, hey, let's go get a hostage. Like, only it's like not let's go get a hostage, it's like, hey, this is gonna fix me, you know. So like in that moment, like I would grab, you know, my spouse, or, you know, if I had one, or, you know, my parent, or, you know, if they were that interested, you know, like somebody, right, to be like, hey, like you can fix me, you know, even though we've made this agreement, like, yeah, not it. I can't fix you. So like, what do you do in those cases?
So I think, again, this really depends on where somebody is in their process and how far along. And this is sort of along those same lines of, hey, welcome to early recovery. This sucks. Hang out for a little while and we'll see what happens next, right? It's sort of a similar deal in some ways, in some respects, with family members and friends, is we really want to get clear about what are you willing to do, particularly maybe in these early days or as somebody progresses. And again, like any good treatment goals, that should change over time, because if it's all the same, something's not happening, right? So this is really the notion of figuring out at whatever stage you're in, what are you willing to do? And maybe it's, hey, I'm willing to be that person for you for right now until you get your feet under you and get connected to a therapist, connected to a sober support network. And then it's going to be turning it over, ideally to a wider and wider net of support, right? I mean, going back to what we're talking about to begin.
Yes.
Capital, that's the purpose, you know, is because we want a catch-all for the variety of things. And when it comes down to it, it's going to become really important, because what if that relapse was triggered by, oh, I don't know, that same support system that just pissed you off, just upset you. So if you're limited to just them, oof, already we're in a little bit of a sticky situation, aren't we?
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. If you got all your eggs in that one basket and then you just take a giant dump on that basket, you got no eggs.
Thank you, Amy. Yes, that's correct.
That was really graphic, Amy.
Yeah. I'm sorry. I don't know why I went in that direction. I'm not sure what happened. It felt very real in the moment. So
Yes, it totally did.
I'm going to work on my metaphors.
I'm gonna try to pull it back. Again, it speaks to the barrier, right? Because if we only have this one thing, and it's only this one thing, and that's all we've ever had to rely on, that's what we're most familiar with, guess what people often want to do in early recovery? No, it's good because, you know, my spouse is my support. Oh, okay, but they're also your trigger. Oh, so they can have more than one role, and you're still going to have to learn how to deal with that. That's problematic in some way.
Yeah, that's so true. It's funny. when I
Lifetime
first
social
got
capital.
sober, my world was so small. Like it was me and my drugs and my alcohol. And I put those things above all else. My family, my friends, my job, it didn't matter. And, you know, even when you first start to get sober, my world was still super duper small. You know, nobody trusted me, and they shouldn't have. I didn't trust myself. You know, nobody necessarily wanted to invest time in me in terms of like people that I knew intimately, not, you know what I mean when I say it's really. Anyway, sorry. So, damn it. Like a squirrel moment. The point I'm trying to make is I had to get resources because all my resources were of a personal nature, and that wasn't going to do it. That was not going to cut it for me. Because
Well,
even though they love me, they didn't understand.
right. And again, why would they and how would they unless they have some experience in this or have some training in this? It's like, well, they don't get it. Well, duh, of course they don't get it.
Right.
They're not necessarily going to be useful to you in that capacity. Here's the other thing. The dynamic of the addiction is you and the addiction. And that's it.
Me and the idiot.
Yeah, me and the
Yeah.
idiot. And that's all. And that's all we need. And there is nothing else. And so part of, again, good treatment is that we're not going to recreate the same dynamic. The goal isn't to create dependence on one particular thing, whether it's your, you know, your meetings or your treatment center or just your therapist or your family member or your friend group or whatever. The goal of good treatment is to create a new dynamic, not recreate the same set of dynamics that brought you to our door to begin with.
I like it. I like it because, yeah. So connection is the antidote for addiction. And like, that's really building some serious social capital. So I think I have two questions. So from a clinician standpoint, and maybe you'll answer them both at the same time, I don't know. But from a clinician standpoint, how do you recommend that people expand their social networks for recovery? And also, what do you recommend families to do to learn? You know, because like they can't be asking, I mean, they could ask, I was getting ready to say, they can't be asking the people that are suffering, like their loved ones, hey, what is this experience like for you? Because I don't know, if it were me, I'd been like, this is great.
Like this.
Leave you.
This was
That's how you really feel, Amy.
Yeah.
Dr. Klodner is going to see this and he's going to be like, wow. This
Man,
is what
I'm
we're going to do
hoping
in the
he'll
third
give me a
hour.
hearty chuckle.
So let's see. I'm trying to recall all parts of the question. So how would I encourage them to expand their social network?
Yeah.
So there is a very good reason, and I think Dr. Kolodner would appreciate this. There's a reason that addiction is most effectively treated in a group, right? And it goes back to that initial point about the lack of connection and that fear of connection. And this is a little combination of gaining that experience and a little almost exposure therapy to that experience to extinguish some of that fear in terms of sitting in a group setting around other people that do get it. And so to answer sort of both of those questions, that is often what we recommend for both the person that is suffering from the addiction and their family members and friends. And as I like to say, that can look like a lot of different things for a lot of different people, you know? So, you know, there are the most accessible and easy go-to things like group therapy, like 12-step communities or SMART, Refuge, et cetera, et cetera. There's lots of different communities out there in terms of support. But this can also look like just reconnecting with something that you no longer have in your life as a result of that. That could be sports, that could be a yoga practice, that could be like a new group of friends with a same interest that takes up sort of that time, energy, effort in a way that is fulfilling and productive for you.
Right on.
Yeah, because you're
So,
talking about filling the void.
Well, filling the void, and again, going back to that notion of we stick around for the benefits. So if we do the whole tap dance around, you know, like here's early sobriety, it sucks. And oh yeah, that's how it's going to look for all of time. I don't know anybody that's going to stick around for that.
Right on. Yeah.
We're going to sign up and stay if we're like, well, this is it.
Yeah. I mean, if it's going to suck on both sides of the fence, I'm going to get loaded.
So, I mean, again, the idea is finding those things that are actually motivating, engaging, enticing for you. And like I said, that's going to look different for different people.
you know,
But we
I
want
keep,
to add to, we don't want to reduce.
I like it. I like it. So I was thinking when you said that, nowhere in there did I hear you say, you know, with the family member to be interested in your, you know, your person with addiction. What I did hear you say is take care of yourself.
Mhm.
Look, you know, and be interested in yourself and expand yourself,
Mhm. Mhm.
which seems counterintuitive if you want to stay together.
Well, it goes back to, I think, a really tried and true topic, you know, and Amy, this one, I'm sure, and to both of you will be familiar. You know, this active addiction process is so selfish. It's so selfish. It's so selfish. And I can't be selfish anymore. Right. But I would absolutely argue that recovery isn't about being selfish. It is about learning how to provide yourself with care. It is self-care. Because we cannot put anything outward that we haven't established internally.
You know what's funny is like, so I've been in recovery since 97. You know, like back in 97, like we were like, what I heard was it's about not being self-centered.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Right? It like this whole conversation around selfishness, like that never, like I don't remember that 23 years ago. You know, like I remember it's not what you think of yourself, it's how often you think of yourself.
Mm-hmm.
You know, like because there was and it wasn't like, it was never like this idea of I'm not going to take care of myself. Like I have to take care of myself. And it was like, I also need to stop looking at myself and picking at myself and choosing myself all the time, when it really is about like, most of the time when I'm talking about myself, I was talking about the addiction piece. You know, because like like the actual you know, is more interested in like engaging with the world and serving others and being a part of it, right?
Well, and again, I think that it's a place to get to, but I think early on in this process, and Amy, you know, you could chime in on this as well in terms of, you know, what I see often is people coming in and it's some of those barriers that show up. I can't possibly put the time and the energy and the effort into this process because I've taken so much of it from all the people that I love. From all
So I wonder why the change, like, is it like, and I don't say this to be like controversial, but are they excuses? Is it us not wanting to commit to the work? Is it, has the culture changed? Like, I wonder why. It's interesting, Joanna, that you don't necessarily remember that being the narrative back then, but today, I do hear that a lot. Like, you know, my significant other, my kids, like I've been so, you know, and again, we're like labeling it, right? Like I've been so bad, or I've been so you know, put in all these negative things, you know, but now that I'm trying to do something positive, now you don't have time for you. Like it does seem messed up to think that way. You know what I mean? Like I get why people say that, but it does feel wrong to me. Maybe it's because I'm on the other side of that right now.
Well, and I think you got to remember too, Amy, that remember what I said earlier about this whole notion of we don't want to recreate the same dynamics. Listen to the language in there. You know, I've been doing all of this and now I've got to do all of this, you know? So the first thing, again, that we're trying to pull people back to is, no, come back into the middle. You know, we're in a river of integration here, and on one side is chaos and on the other side is rigidity, you know, and people are often bouncing back and forth between those two things. But when we start shifting that black and white dynamic, it may look like, yeah, the real me, to your point, Joanna, wants to be engaged and invested and of service and all of these things. And how do we connect real me with also this other warring faction that is wanting to just take over and be all about it? So it's really about coming into that middle ground again and not allowing them to stay in that space of, well, I've either got to, you know, do nothing for myself or minimize it as much as possible in order to somehow make up ground over here with the family, with the job, with the whatever. And that's a tough concept to wrap your head around if, again, you're used to the dichotomy and always seeking out that black and white.
It kind of sounds to me like, our definition of love has changed over time. You know, like how we as society perceive it, you know, from back then. But also there is this conversation about shame and guilt, you know, like that, because I remember being early recovery, having shame and guilt, and people would say to me things like, you will address all of those things, and it's okay to be ashamed and to know that you're not always going to be that place. You know, and I don't hear that conversation so much these days.
I think more and more often shame and guilt seem to get almost entangled with each other, and it's like it's not a different experience for a lot of people. They don't always recognize that notion of shame, me as a person, I'm bad, there's something bad about me, and guilt, that behavior was not great and I don't really want to repeat that. So two really separate concepts that get sort of tripped up as just this one umbrella of I'm just bad. And how do I undo that?
How does that even get brought up in a clinical setting?
I mean, often again around the reflection on maybe some of the behaviors that we practice, some of the behaviors that were exhibited, some of those, as I like to call them, my favorite sort of cringe-worthy moments that make us all just kind of want to crawl out of whatever space we're sitting in, and not being able to move from that place, I think, is another piece. You know, in my mind, shame is the anchor around people's necks that remains a barrier between them and really being engaged in their recovery process. Because if I'm bad, then that means something else. I don't deserve it. I'm not worth it. Whatever it is, whatever that messaging is that underlies that, as opposed to the guilt, which is when under the influence, I'm not in a good space and I'm not going to act in ways that are congruent for me, you know? And I think that's one of the biggest fights, is that shame comes from living in a state of incongruence. It comes from that place of being an incongruence, and in many ways recognizing that this doesn't fit, this doesn't actually work, and yet I don't know how to make it stop.
Thanks for clarifying that, because actually I was if Amy didn't remind me of Max Headroom earlier, she reminded me of Max Headroom now.
She has to do her own video.
I heard that. Dude, listen, I apologize, but I've been drinking a lot of water today. And I was dancing around on my seat and I just couldn't take it anymore. It's very stressful. I tried to like, I didn't want to interrupt. I was going to say something. And I just thought I would like slink off and use the ladies' room. But, you know, but listen, I had epiphany while I was doing that. Maybe it's also that self-care and the importance placed upon that has changed over the last 2 decades.
Oh yeah, that's a good one.
And that we've really, really kind of ushered in some new importance on that. We've placed some more importance on that kind of stuff. I mean, because listen, I'm not saying I remember a lot about trying to get sober at 16 because I didn't, but I do remember kind of the culture that was around me in the rooms.
Wait a
at
second.
the time.
You first got sober at 16?
Yeah.
Dude, that's fucking badass.
Oh, it lasted all of like 3 months.
Still,
it was literally
at
like
16. I was not thinking that.
Well, I didn't have a choice, you know, like I was in a dark place. My stepdad had lost his battle to cancer, and man, I was drinking every night just to like quiet my thoughts and go to bed. I mean, between that and like self-harm, you know, because that was like a thing for me too then. It was before it was even called something, you know. I just knew that it was the only time. I don't know, it was weird. I don't think it was attention seeking. It was like the only way I felt something. I was either numb or I felt pain. I wanted to feel pain.
Yeah.
And my mom eventually figured out like what I was doing. And she was like, whoa, and got me into some treatment and some therapy. And, you know, I mean, it all sounded great. I walked into those AA meetings and I saw the traditions and the steps. And, you know, I was in a treatment setting for adolescents, and like, God, these people are super nice. Like, old as shit, but they're super nice. And I'm super glad that this place is like a thing for people that have a problem with drugs and alcohol, but that's not me. You know, at 16 when you know everything, right? So I'm like 16 and I'm like, what I have is situational depression. That's what I have. Well, I don't even know if that's like a thing. I just completely like said it. So my parent, you know, God love my mom. She was like, well, sweetie, it does make sense. And I'm like, yeah, you know, I'm good. I'm fine now. And then what happened from 16 to 32? 32. You know, it did what it does. The idiot got bigger. It got bigger, it got badder, it got stronger, it got
Grew up.
bully. Yeah, it grew up.
It pushed you
right alongside of me, you know, and I had no defense against it. Of course I didn't. Nobody does, I don't think, until you start to get some exposure to the stuff we're talking about. You know, if you're lucky enough, and we're just talking about people that are lucky enough, fortunate enough, or just right place, right time, that even get into a treatment setting. I mean, I think about how many people I know that have never been to treatment, have never had an opportunity, right? I've never had an opportunity to sit down in front of somebody like Christina and have them say, you know, it makes sense why you think the way you think, or why you feel the way you feel. Like, you're not a terrible person, and you're not weak-willed, and you're not all these completely shitty things that I know you feel about yourself, right? There's reasons for all of this. Like that, I think about that, and how many people out there do you think there are that have never been to treatment or had any kind of opportunity to talk to a professional? I shudder to think about it, honestly.
Probably the majority of people. I mean, like, we didn't get substance use until, we didn't get substance use treatment until the Affordable Care Act went into place, because then there was reciprocity. Right. Which actually, okay, so you were a supervisor, you supervise people, like, we have to go down this path, right? Because we're bumping up on time. But so if you are blessed enough, because this is a blessing, right? Like, if you are blessed enough, it's a gift, right?
And it almost, I'll be honest, like, really quick, I'm going to just say this, because I'm struggling with this these days, kind of now learning more about all the things that I didn't know. There are days where I genuinely feel bad that I have been in a treatment environment more than once. And almost like some weird form of survivor's guilt, right? Like I've had these opportunities for whatever reason, right? Then they're buried. And there's people that will never. And that leaves me feeling some kind of way. Like, why doesn't everybody get an opportunity?
Yeah, so it's drawing a connection between two things that may appear like they're related when they're not.
Yeah, absolutely.
That brings up that emotion.
Incongruity.
Doesn't seem like it fits.
Oh, okay. So,
Sorry, ask your question.
No, that was good. No, this was great, right? Because it's
but I'm glad you said that because I really have been feeling like dog shit about that.
That's the benefit of having a clinician on the
show. I mean, that's the benefit of having this beautiful woman as my friend. I get to ask the hard-hitting questions. I mean, I'm winning on various levels here today.
I'd love to say I have a monopoly on it, but I don't. It's there. And it's this type of forum where people get to ask those questions and hear some of those responses and answers. So
should make Christina our like resident clinician go-to.
Squirrel.
Oh my God.
She's like, no, I'm not falling for that.
This is somebody that's known me a long time.
Gotta help.
Yeah, she knows. She's like, come back.
She's like, I'm not falling for
come
that.
back to me.
Back into the room.
Come back to me. Come on.
Okay.
Oh, that's hilarious. Okay, so let's keep it moving. So if you are able to take advantage of treatment, like, how do you do that? Like, how do you get the most out of behavioral health services?
So this is where sort of, and you all will appreciate this, but sort of a very, very, again, simplistic piece is that honesty, openness, willingness, you know, and wherever you are on that continuum on any given day, just share that, whatever it is. So, you know, in my therapy practice, it's working with people, and again, in substance use treatment, it's working with people wherever they are in the moment. And going back to that notion that we tend to sort of tie all these things together that may or may not be related. You know, if you can walk into a treatment group and say, you know what, I am not the least bit motivated to be here. In fact, I don't want to be here. And yet you're sitting here, that's more than enough. Right? So to engage in the process, I think showing up, half the battle. I think, you know, willing, open about wherever you are in that moment. Sorry. My dog's contributing. You're welcome.
That's all right. Joanna's got one too.
Yeah, he keeps coming in like.
On a more tangible level, you know, I think there's some pieces we have to talk about. And in some ways, this is exactly how, you know, Colmac got initiated was, you know, access to treatment is a huge, huge factor for many, many people, whether professional treatment or community support groups. Obviously, community support, large, overwhelming amount in many, many ways, which is what makes it such a wonderful resource. But professional treatment for a lot of people is not so easy for them to navigate. They don't always understand what these different levels of care are, what they mean, how it works. And some of that is just accessing people like myself that have the know-how, and some of that is accessing people like all of you that just have some sort of familiarity to point somebody in a direction, and then figuring out what's going to be viable and doable for somebody, you know? So going back to if you cannot afford treatment, for example, then what's sort of the next best thing for you? And in terms of something that's going to allow you to connect with something and also not add additional strain and stress on your process, you know?
So because I want to be very, very clear, right? Like because I know you know this, but I want to make sure that we're clear. Like when people think, it has been my experience that when people speak treatment, what they're really thinking is 28-day inpatient, lock you down, take away your keys, take away your wallet, take away all your things, take away your access to people, take away your decision-making process and like treat just, it's a step up from
Really
jail,
immersive
but not
process.
fun.
Yeah,
Huh?
I mean, it's institutionalization, right? We're not being
Yeah. But there's more there's more to treatment. There's more treatment options than just 28-day, boom,
Absolutely.
you're in a box.
Absolutely. So, I mean, this is where, intensive outpatient, I think, fits a wonderful, it filled in a huge gap in the process, right? Because there was sort of historically this notion of that 28-day lockdown, no access to anything except exactly what, we're going to tell you. And then boom, out there into the world, and good luck. And hopefully you connect within the community in some way, shape, or form or another. So I think the intensive outpatient, where you are spending some of your time sort of immersed in that, really supportive environment where everybody's sort of on the same page and speaking your language, and you're also exposed to those triggers and those challenges and those, missteps and automatic thoughts and whatever else, and at the same time that you are getting those services, gives you a really good way to sort of do a checks and balances about, so where am I actually at, right? Because I still got the work stress, the family stress, the school stress, the life stress. I'm not sort of fully in this bubble. I'm still getting a little bit of exposure to that. And oh yeah, I'm going to go into my group tonight and let go of at least hopefully some of that, leave it there with them so that I can go on about my business, Mm-hmm. And just for what it's worth, I have to put a plug in here, Amy, for things like continued care or that outpatient level of care, right?
Yeah.
This is that notion, longer treatment duration equals better treatment outcomes. And that doesn't have to be, again, a super investment of time and energy effort. So a step down level of care, again, so you can go inpatient, you can go to intensive outpatient. The next step down is outpatient, 2 hours group therapy, 1 time a week for however long you're getting something out of that process is my general rule of thumb. And then you have other services like individual therapy. And again, interspersed in all of this is those community supports, those hobbies that come back, those goals that can now, be realized and maybe even met in some capacity. Just re-engagement with the world, re-engagement with your world, whatever it is.
Oh, that's awesome.
Yeah.
Look at that. She just brought it all back around to Recovery Capital. Even though we scrolled her everywhere.
She's my favorite.
Don't tell her though.
I'm just like for humans.
Oh, for humans.
Yeah. I do have one quick question. How do you think as a whole COVID was handled, or that people navigated and are continuing to navigate through COVID from like a mental health perspective? And what do you think the kind of longer term ramifications from this are going to be?
I think
that's hard to.
Yeah, I was like, oh, just one question, and it had to be this one, huh? Thanks for that. I think longer term is actually the key words in there. How it was handled, I think, like many good things that come about in a crisis, we battened down the hatches and really tried to make do and figure it out. And I can tell you from my experience in doing teletherapy and in full transparency, I was a little skeptical. Imagine that. I was a little skeptical about, okay, how is this going to work? What is going to happen here? But again, if we don't move too far away from that foundation, those basics, the connection is the connection. is there in a parent. Maybe there are some additional challenges with not being right there, but Amy, you know this, and you all get to see it now. Having this on video, you can be very expressive and engaging in lots of other ways, and it doesn't always have to be in the way in which we imagine it to be. So again, move away from the rigidity, move away from, those two banks, and come into that integrative space where it's like, yeah, it's not going to look exactly like what we expected it to look like. And yet somehow it can still work, and quite effectively, actually. Yeah. As far as, COVID, I think there's long reaching challenges that are going to come along with that. But this, Amy, and I'll say it for the benefit of everybody, I believe in sort of, at least in my practice, I have, I think, the honor to work with people that allows me to, in some ways, be vicariously traumatized and in some ways vicariously healed, So I think that is a potential perspective to take on this experience. We're all being traumatized in some way, which also opens us up to the opportunity to heal, maybe in ways that we didn't necessarily imagine before. So that is that piece, and again, in my opinion, that we can bring the gratitude back to say, what is this trying to teach us? What is this trying to open our eyes to, maybe that we hadn't yet because we didn't have reason to, maybe in that capacity, but now we do.
That's beautiful.
I miss seeing your face every day.
I miss seeing your face every day.
I love that. That's so good.
Where is the door for you to come into pre-rounds? And
I don't know. That was so well said, though, because I do think we sell ourselves short. I think this past year, and I think yesterday was the year. It was like a full year yesterday, right? For the U.S. kind of being on lockdown and from varying degrees. And so I think I really don't think we give ourselves enough credit.
I don't think we always want to acknowledge sometimes that we're tired and raked over the coals, and I don't want to be resilient anymore. But keep in mind, it doesn't mean you don't possess it.
Right. Yes.
Just because we might not be in the particular mood in any given moment to bring it forth and to use it does not mean that it is not there. It's there.
As my friend Joanna Dolan would say, right on.
Right on, right on, right on.
Right on, right on.
That's my best Matthew McConaughey.
I love it. Yeah, no, that was good. It was good.
So we have two questions to wrap up with, because we respect your time, right? Because we've said this several times, right? Like, the cool thing about doing this podcast is that we get to interact with our heroes, and you were definitely one of Amy's heroes. And I think after spending like the last 2 hours with you, I'm like, yes, you're one of mine too.
Duh. Absolutely.
So thank you for that. So let's say like 20 years from now, you are sitting on your porch and you're like looking back at your career, like, what do you hope is the legacy of your work?
Gosh. That's a big question. I really think, again, it absolutely goes back to that place of, let's honor the pain. Let's honor the suffering. Let's acknowledge it for what it is. You guys asked me earlier what was my favorite thing about working with this population. My favorite thing about working with this and many other things is that let's just for 5 minutes be human beings with one another. And who cares if it sounds right, and who cares if it's respectable and it's polite and it's all of these things. Let's just rip the Band-Aid off and say, this is what it is here in this moment, and acknowledge that there is healing and strength and resiliency that comes from that. So I guess my hope is, you know, that people get the opportunity to say, yes, I have suffered, and yes, I am resilient, and yes, I am many other things beyond just that one experience. It is not one thing that makes it up. It's all of these things.
Beautiful.
Be
Oh, I
right.
love that answer. So I'm sure that somebody listening is like, I gotta connect with Christina. So how can people connect with you?
Well, as I said, I am still I believe, some type of card-carrying member of Colmac Outpatient Recovery. In my part-time capacity, and Gladstone Psychiatry and Wellness is where I do my private practice. So there is access there.
Love it.
Love it.
Thank you so much, my friend, for being here.
Thank you so much for having me.
Yeah, awesome.
Agreed. Thank you very much.
What a great way to start the weekend.
Oh, I love it. Yes. No matter what you're doing
Right?
this weekend, enjoy yourself and that recovery capital that you've built up.
Yes, yes, yes.
All right. Have a great day, guys. Thank you so much
Thank you, guys.
for being part of it.
Thank you.
Appreciate it.